You come home after a long day. Your brain's tired. Your body's heavier than it should feel. And all you want is something easy. Something that doesn't ask much from you. So you sit. You press play. One episode turns into three. It's quiet comfort. But something about it feels hollow. That was me almost every night. It felt normal, even earned. But one evening, I paused. Not the show, my routine. I thought, what if I used this time differently? Not to escape, but to build something in me. That night, I picked up a book I bought months ago but never touched. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't read for hours, just 10 minutes. But something shifted. My mind wasn't numb, it was alive. And weirdly, I felt proud. Over the next few nights, I reached for that book instead of the remote. I started sleeping better. I began to feel clearer in the mornings. I wasn't dragging through my days anymore. My thoughts had more order. I could actually hear myself think again. That 30-day decision wasn't about books versus shows. It was about choosing presence over autopilot, control over habit. It reminded me that my evenings weren't lost hours. They were mine. I could use them to learn, to reflect, to grow, not just to numb out. We don't realize how much these tiny choices shape our identity. We say we don't have time, but we give away hours without noticing. What changed me wasn't just what I did, but who I started becoming. Someone curious, someone focused, someone who didn't just scroll through life, but paid attention. It wasn't loud or perfect. It was quiet, slow, and real. But sometimes, that's all it takes to start becoming someone new. For 30 days, I stopped watching Netflix. No shows, no binge nights, no quick background episodes while eating dinner. At first, it felt weird, quiet, too quiet. The silence almost felt uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do with it. But that's when I reached for a book instead. I didn't set a big goal. I just told myself, read something, anything. 10 minutes turned into 20. Some nights, I read for an hour without realizing. Fiction pulled me in gently. Nonfiction challenged how I thought. Biographies gave me perspective. And mindset books made me rethink my daily habits. That one change, swapping the screen for pages, shifted something I hadn't expected. My attention span stretched. I could sit still again. My mind didn't feel foggy. I started noticing the space between my thoughts. I didn't need constant stimulation anymore. That alone made me feel lighter, more present, more in control. And the books? They weren't just words. They were teachers. They gave me real, applicable lessons. I found ideas about time, discipline, money, and identity that stuck with me. Reading isn't fast. It doesn't reward you immediately, but it builds something quietly. Every paragraph feels like a step forward. I wasn't just learning facts. I was shifting how I thought about myself. My evenings weren't passive anymore. They were mine again. I started writing notes in the margins, underlining ideas. My sleep improved. My mornings felt cleaner, calmer. I didn't expect a simple change to have such a ripple effect, but it did. And it wasn't about the books themselves. It was about choosing something that filled me up rather than drained me. Something that made me think instead of escape. That 30-day decision was entertainment versus reading. It was about choosing growth, even when it's quiet, even when no one sees it. It's strange how fast time disappears when you're watching something. One episode turns into 4. You check the clock, and it's past midnight. You tell yourself it's okay, you needed to relax. But when it happens every night, it stops being rest and starts being avoidance. That's what I realized. I wasn't choosing how I spent my evenings. I was just falling into them, automatically, without thinking. And that pattern was costing me hours I didn't think I had. When I stopped watching shows and started reading, it felt unfamiliar. There was no autoplay, no catchy theme songs, just quiet and a book in my hands. At first, I kept checking the time, expecting to feel bored. But I wasn't. I was focused. I was choosing what I wanted to do, and for how long. I read 20 minutes one night, 45 the next. No pressure, just presence. I began to see how much time I really had once I stopped wasting it, without realizing. By the end of the month, I'd finished 4 full books. Books I'd been meaning to read for years. They'd been sitting on my shelf while I told myself I was too busy. Turns out I wasn't too busy. I was just distracted. Screens made me feel like I didn't have time. Reading showed me I had plenty, if I use it better. I started noticing gaps in my day where I could squeeze in 10 minutes of reading instead of scrolling. I learned that being in control of your time isn't about strict schedules. It's about intention, about choosing how you use your time instead of letting habits choose for you. That shift didn't just make me feel more productive, it made me feel more responsible for my life. And that changed everything. When I stopped watching Netflix every night, the silence felt louder than I expected. The background noise was gone. No theme songs, no cliffhangers, no laugh tracks. Just stillness. At first, it made me restless. I realized how used to constant noise I had become. It filled my evenings, distracted me from my thoughts, kept me from noticing how tired my mind actually was. But after a few nights of reading instead, something changed. My brain started to slow down. It didn't race from scene to scene or storyline to storyline. Instead, it stayed with one idea, one page, one thought at a time. That focus didn't just help while I read. It followed me the next day, too. My conversations felt more present. My mind didn't feel foggy by noon. I wasn't overstimulated before bed. And the biggest surprise? I started falling asleep faster. I hadn't realized how much late-night TV was messing with my sleep cycle. The brightness of the screen, the constant movement. It kept my brain alert even when my body was exhausted. Reading calmed that alertness. There were no flashy visuals, no noise, just sentences calmly moving forward. I started choosing books that made me think, but didn't overwhelm me. Stories that stayed with me. Lessons I'd reflect on the next morning. That kind of mental stillness. It's rare, and it made me realize how uncomfortable I had become with quiet. But in that quiet, I found space. Space to think, to rest, to actually feel present. The peace I found wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't come with applause. But it was real. It stayed with me. And I began to understand why people who are truly focused and intentional seem so calm. They aren't chasing distractions. They've learned how to sit still with their thoughts. And that's powerful. Every book I picked up taught me something I hadn't thought about before. Not in a heavy, academic way. More like small wake-up calls that kept stacking. One book walked me through how people truly build wealth. Slowly, consistently, and by understanding how money behaves. It wasn't flashy advice or get-rich-quick schemes. It was quiet truths about discipline, saving, and how emotions drive spending. Another book explained habits, not just what they are, but how they're formed and broken. I saw my own routines clearly for the first time. Staying up late, reaching for comfort, avoiding discomfort. I wasn't lazy. I was stuck in patterns I didn't even question. And then there was one on leadership. It challenged how I thought about people, pressure, responsibility. It made me reflect on how I show up in relationships, at work, even with myself. Reading did something scrolling never could. It slowed down my thinking, but sped up my awareness. I stopped chasing quick entertainment and started looking for lessons. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand things better. That shift felt personal. I wasn't just trying to kill time anymore. I was trying to learn something useful, something real. The more I read, the more I noticed a quiet confidence growing in me. I didn't know everything, but I was trying to. That hunger to learn reminded me of people I've looked up to, mentors, leaders, even quiet achievers I've seen from afar. They always seem to be reading, always growing. There's a reason for that. They never think they've arrived. That mindset stuck with me. I started seeing reading not as a task, but a habit that builds a certain kind of wealth. One that doesn't show up in your bank account first, but in your thinking. And eventually, that changes everything else too. Every time something felt off, stress at work, an argument, that heavy loneliness that creeps in on quiet nights, I turned to Netflix. It became my go-to fix. Not because the shows were incredible, but because they were there. Easy, safe, I didn't have to think or feel too much. I could just press play and tune out. But what I didn't realize was that I was avoiding more than just boredom. I was avoiding myself. The silence after turning off the screen felt uncomfortable because it brought everything I was trying to suppress straight to the surface. The sadness, the pressure, the things I hadn't processed. And when I replaced that screen with reading, I had to face those feelings. Not all at once, but slowly, page by page. Reading didn't offer the same distraction. It pulled me in, but gently, and because it wasn't noisy or overwhelming, my thoughts started coming back to me, raw, honest, sometimes painful. I noticed how often I'd reach for my phone just to avoid sitting still. How many times I thought about calling someone, but didn't. That awareness was uncomfortable, but it was real. I started writing my thoughts down. I took longer walks without music. I started talking to friends more intentionally, not just scrolling through their stories. These changes weren't dramatic, but they felt meaningful. There's a strange kind of strength that comes from facing what you usually avoid. Reading gave me the space to do that. It didn't give me all the answers, but it helped me start asking better questions. Why am I avoiding this? What am I really feeling? What do I need right now? Over time, those questions became tools, not burdens. I didn't need to escape as often because I wasn't afraid of sitting with myself anymore. I used to think I was just a night owl, that staying up late was normal, that feeling tired in the morning was just part of being an adult. But the truth was, I wasn't resting. I was consuming. Show after show. My brain was still working overtime even while my body begged for sleep. I'd fall asleep with the TV on, wake up groggy, and reach for coffee before my feet even touched the floor. My mornings felt rushed. My head was foggy. My patience was short. I thought I needed more hours in the day, but what I really needed was better recovery. When I swapped my screen time for reading, I didn't expect sleep to improve so much. But it did. Reading didn't overstimulate me. It gave my brain something gentle to focus on, something steady. It became a quiet signal that the day was ending. No bright flashes, no sudden plot twists, just calm. Within the first week, I started falling asleep faster. I stopped waking up in the middle of the night. My mornings felt clearer. I didn't snooze the alarm 3 times. I wasn't dragging myself through breakfast. I felt ready, grounded, and strangely focused, even before coffee. The ripple effect hit every part of my day. With more energy, I made better choices. I was sharper during work hours. I didn't forget things as often. I had more mental space to plan, to prioritize, to think things through instead of reacting. Even my spending changed. I wasn't buying things just to feel better. I was already feeling better. I always thought high performance came from doing more, but it turns out it often comes from resting better. And reading became my way of giving my mind what it had been missing: stillness, safety, and space to reset. I used to tell myself I needed Netflix to relax after a long day, that sitting on the couch and zoning out was a reward I'd earned. But over time, I noticed something wasn't right. The more I watched, the more drained I felt, not just physically, but mentally. Even when I had time, I didn't feel like doing anything. My to-do list sat untouched. My ideas stayed ideas, and I chalked it up to burnout. But when I stopped using my evenings for passive watching and started reading instead, something shifted in ways I didn't expect. Books didn't just fill the time. They woke something up in me. I started reading about habits, productivity, small business. I found myself pausing mid-page to take notes. Not because I had to, because I wanted to remember things. I wanted to apply them. And the strange part? That energy didn't end when the book closed. It spilled over into my day. I started checking off tasks quicker. I finally opened the document for that side hustle I'd been thinking about for months. I began organizing things I've been putting off for weeks: my inbox, my budget, even the cluttered shelf in my room, all without forcing myself. I wasn't dragging through the day anymore. I had momentum. Reading wasn't just informative, it was activating. It stirred ideas, focus, and even a little ambition I didn't know I had. It reminded me of who I could be if I used my time with intention. When I was watching TV every night, I stayed stuck. comfortable but stuck. But when I started feeding my mind with purpose, action followed naturally. And that action made me feel more capable, more in control, and more connected to the version of myself I actually wanted to become. Before I made the change, I didn't think much about how I saw myself. I thought identity was fixed, just who you are. But looking back, I can see how much I had quietly accepted being average. I didn't call it that, of course. I just said I was trying my best, or doing okay. But deep down, I wasn't proud. I was just existing. I filled my time with easy things, quick things, things that helped the hours pass without asking too much of me. Netflix was one of those things. It gave me something to talk about, something to do, something to numb out with. But it never made me feel better about myself. Not once. When I started reading instead, something subtle started changing. Not instantly, not loudly, but it was real. I began to feel sharper, more aware, more responsible for how I spent my time. And with each book I finished, I felt something new, pride, not the performative kind. Just a quiet feeling that I was becoming someone I respected, someone who chose growth, someone who didn't need to keep numbing themselves to get through the day. And that started to reflect outward. I spoke with more clarity. I stopped second-guessing myself in meetings. I didn't always have the answer, but I had confidence in my ability to learn. And people noticed. Friends asked what had changed. My work improved. I started setting boundaries I used to avoid. I wasn't acting anymore. I was becoming. That shift in identity didn't come from one book. It came from consistency, from proving to myself night after night that I could choose differently, that I could grow. And when you start seeing yourself that way, you treat yourself differently, and the world begins to treat you differently too. Before you go, ask yourself this. Are your habits shaping the person you want to become or the one you're trying to avoid? If that made you pause, then hit subscribe, not for us, but for the version of you that's done wasting time. Like this video and drop a comment. What's one habit you know you need to break? Starting now?